Well, once again, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, The Fundamentals of Public Speaking. Glad to have you here. Looks like we've got some people that are just arriving in the room. So move into the center aisle so there's room enough for everyone to sit. Find a comfortable spot so you can see the speaker. All right, just kidding. This is pretty much one way. We're not going to make this interactive where you're going to be able to use your voice to ask questions, but I'm going to be fielding questions throughout the webinar here today. And all you need to do is to type it right into the question form on the screen in front of you. And that's going to pop up right here and let me know exactly what you've got to ask. So when you have any questions, just go ahead, type that in. It will pop up over here and we'll be able to take care of it. So here we go. Welcome to the webinar. I'm going to make a quick apology and then I'm going to get started. The quick apology. You're going to hear a little bit of scratchiness in my voice here today. This is not necessarily my natural sexy voice. This is my scratchy voice for you today. 2 days ago, this would not have been possible. 2 days ago, I had full-blown laryngitis. It was all whispers and squeaks, and that was it. That was all you would have heard. Luckily, today we're doing a little bit better, and I'll be able to make it through. I apologize for any scratch there, but as we tell our clients all the time, you in the audience, you don't really care how I feel. And that's the way anytime you're presenting also, your listeners don't care about how you feel. What they care about is, what are they getting? Your listeners care about what are they getting out of this, and they don't care about you so much. So today on this webinar, The Fundamental of Public Speaking, you're going to learn some tips and some tricks that you can use right away to help you improve the quality of any presentation that you're delivering. That's really what you're looking for, and that's why you're here. My guess is you've signed up because you have to speak in some form or another, whether it's in meetings, whether it's in interviews, whether it's in conference calls or video conferencing, or maybe you have to get up in front of more formal groups and speak. Look, we're always presenting every day, all the time. A presentation is any time you've got information that you want to convey to somebody else, which means we're always presenting. Even if somebody just stops you in the hallway and asks you a question, you're always presenting. And this webinar, the tips that you learn here are going to help across the board. Let me just do a couple of quick clicks here, and then we will get ourselves all up and ready to go. Bring back my question form. There we go. We are all ready to go. We're rolling here. So let's run through the agenda and give you a sense of how this is all going to come your way over the next hour together. Our agenda, we're going to begin by asking and answering the question, what's your ideal style? You're going to get the opportunity to determine for yourself, what's my ideal? How do I want to be perceived when I'm speaking to others? And then we're going to bring in the 8 fundamentals of public speaking. And for the most part, we're talking about body language. And we'll talk about how your body language and the way that you say things physically and verbally, how they impact perception and your ideal style. And finally, we'll wrap up with a couple of extra pointers related to communicating with confidence. Most people want to be confident speakers, and that's what we're going to focus on is how do you do that not only through your body language, but also through your language, through the words that you use. So let's get to it. Let's jump right in. And again, whenever you have a question, go ahead and type that right into your question form, and I'll be happy to answer that. Now, before I dive in here, again, my name is Eliot Shapiro. My company is EMS Communications. We're located in Northbrook, Illinois, just north of Chicago. And we have been in the business of ridding the world of boring presentations, one speaker at a time. That's been our mission for the past 16 years. We do this through workshops. We do this through one-on-one coaching. We do this through large group seminars and webinars like this. So along the way during this webinar, I'm going to give you a sense of how to work on these things, how during our workshops with our clients, we work on this. One last thing before we dive in, here's a little incentive for you to stick around all the way till the end of the hour. Your incentive is for everyone that has stayed all the way through the webinar, we're going to have a drawing right at the end. Well, following the webinar, we do that here privately. We'll do it probably on Monday morning. But we're going to put all the names in of everyone that was here for the webinar. We're going to pull a name, and that person is going to receive an invitation to attend one of our public workshops for free as our guest. Every month, we hold a 2-day workshop here at our offices in Northbrook. These workshops are limited to 8 people maximum. And one of you is going to win the golden ticket with free entry into one of those workshops. Okay, just have to do a quick adjustment. I know you're seeing my screen here, and that's okay. Let's get back to it. PowerPoint, cooperate. There we go. Let's ask the question first. What's your ideal style? In other words, what we're really talking about is perception. Perception is reality. We all understand that perception is reality. It's kind of even become cliche these days. But it really is true, especially in the world of presenting and public speaking. Again, your listeners don't care about you. What they really care about is their perception of who you are. Because they don't know you, they don't know what you're all about. All they've got to go on is their perception of you. And their perception is always right. Whatever their perception is, that's their reality, and it's right for them. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to give a little bit of input, because you get to help determine your ideal style. And here's how to do it. Imagine for a moment that you've just given a presentation. And imagine it's to a fairly decent sized group, whatever size you want to imagine. And for the sake of the exercise, imagine that you have just done your best. Not only did you give a really good presentation, but you've just given the presentation of your life. Everything went as well as you could possibly imagine. So nobody walked out. Nobody fell asleep. There was no texting in the middle of it. Everybody was there and engaged. And imagine now you just finished up and it's standing ovation time for you. They're giving you a standing ovation. That's how well you did. So with that as your scenario, now I want you to think about the fact that you can now eavesdrop. And you can hear what all those listeners are saying about you and about your presentation. The question is, what words would you like to hear them using? What words or what phrases, ideally, if you just gave your best presentation ever, what words would they be using to describe you as a speaker? I'm going to ask you to go ahead and type those right in to your question window. And I'll share them with the group. So let's hear what you've got. What words would you like to hear? All right, I've got passionate. I see energetic coming in. Good. What else would you like to hear them saying? Knowledgeable. I see entertaining. I see wow. Engaging. Confident. All right, what else would you like to hear your listeners say? That you were motivating. Professional. Okay, good. Keep them coming. Powerful, articulate. Great. Confident again. Engaging. Inspirational. Clear. This is great. Now look, who wouldn't like to hear these things, right? Who wouldn't like to hear afterwards that they were clear, inspirational, articulate, motivating, engaging, that it was a wow, that it was passionate? What's also interesting is some people type in that they would like to be professional and take me seriously. And other people say, I want to be entertaining, engaging, funny. And those are all right because that's what you're looking for. And as your coaches, we would not try to make you into something that you're not. This is what we go through with all of our clients, is determining first, what was the ideal? What would be the target that you're going for? persuasive, that it was good quality time. All these things are great. But the question that you really need to think of as we really get back to the fact that perception is reality is that the way you always come across right now today? Do you always come across the ideal way? Are you always confident and persuasive and inspiring and knowledgeable? It would be nice to say yes, but we also know that it's not that easy, right? And why isn't that easy? It's because physically and with our voice and with our body and our words, sometimes we do things or say things that give a different impression. Or we do things and say them in a way that gives people the wrong impression and creates a different perception in their mind. So the real question then here is, what does it look like and what does it sound like to come across this way? To be inspirational and clear and motivating and entertaining and passionate. How does that look and how does that sound? That's what we're going to dive into now as we discuss the fundamentals of public speaking. I'm going to reveal the 8 fundamentals that we're going to speak about, and then we'll break it down one at a time to talk about those. And as I go through them, I'll give you some examples, but please do ask questions along the way. So here are the 8 fundamentals that we're going to focus on. The 8 fundamentals are eye contact, gestures, movement, your speaking pace, your pauses, your non-words, we'll talk about those, your facial expression, and your energy level. All of these play a role in how you're perceived by your audience. Now look, I get if you're looking at this list right now and saying to yourself, well, gosh, this ain't rocket science. I was expecting more. Look, these are the fundamentals. Just like any sport, like baseball, in spring training, all these guys, millionaires, top of their game, are going back to spring training and working on fundamental skills. The same skills they worked on in Little League and high school, they're working on in spring training. And just like those professionals, we as business professionals have to do the same thing. So even though these seem simple, let's really dive in and figure out how they equate to the way you're perceived by others. And let's begin with eye contact. Chances are somewhere in your life you've learned eye contact is important. Maybe your mother taught you growing up, make eye contact when you're talking to somebody. And it's true, it's critical. We all have to do it. And why do it? Because when you make eye contact with people, it shows a lot of these adjectives that you typed in before. It shows confidence and honesty and sincerity. When you look somebody in the eye, it shows confidence. And they tend to believe you. They tend to trust you a little bit more when you look them in the eye. And of course, the opposite is also true. So if you don't look people in the eye and you're not making good eye contact, maybe they're going to think, I can't trust this person. Maybe this person is not so confident. I'm not connecting with him or her. But if we've all been told eye contact is important, how do you do it right? Because a lot of people get up in front of a group and they try to make eye contact with everybody. And they look over here, they look over there, they look over here, they look over there, and they're kind of scattered. They're all over the place. So the question is, and we get this question all the time, how long should you look at somebody? Well, there's no time frame. There's no saying it's got to be 3 seconds at least, and then you move on. Best way to think about it is to give each person a complete thought of eye contact. You give one thought to one person, next person gets the next thought, the next person gets the next thought. But how do you determine what's a thought? The best way to think about it is with punctuation. Anytime there's a comma or a period, that's the end of a thought. Or a question mark, an exclamation point. End of a thought. And that's when you switch from one person to another. So instead of going from one word to another with each person, If you think about punctuation and a full thought, it's no more than one sentence per person. So you can certainly do it that way. You look to one person for one sentence and then you're done. Move on to somebody else for the next sentence. Find somebody else, they get the next one. Or if it's a little bit longer of a sentence, you split it up with a comma. So you look to somebody on your right and you start it over there, comma. Look to somebody on your left. Give them the next point, period. Drive it home. It works in small groups and it even works in large groups. In your extra large groups, though, if there's, let's say, 100, 150 people, you get the benefit of the bowling pin effect. And let's talk about that. If you're in front of 150 people, you know in your mind, there's no way I'm going to talk to everyone. There's no way I'm going to look and make eye contact with everyone in the room, and you're probably not. But you still want each person sitting out there to feel as if they were getting your eye contact. So what you do in that large group is you pick one person in each section. Each time you go to a different section of the room, you pick a different person in that section. And you look at that person in the far back right section. And when you pause for a second and you're making eye contact with that person, what you'll find is you get 5 or 6 people kind of nodding their head at you because they think they're getting eye contact. You're looking at one person, but the person in front of them, the person behind them, the person next to them, you're far enough away, they feel like they're getting eye contact too. It really does work. And here's a great piece of advice. If you're not comfortable making eye contact, not everyone is, you don't actually have to make eye contact. You just have to create the perception that you're making eye contact. So what do? You find that piece of skin right between the eyes or right between the eyebrows or the bridge or the tip of the nose. If you look at that, even if the person's across a conference table from you, they have no idea that you're not actually making eye contact, and that's a benefit to you. Now, we've got a lot of do's when it comes to these fundamentals. Let's talk through some of the don'ts also. The first don't here is don't stay too long with each person. If you're just staring at one person for 10, 15, 20 seconds, it's a little creepy after a while. They're going to think you're stalking them, and that's not what we're talking about here. A full thought, really no more than a full sentence. So it shouldn't be more than, let's say, 5, 6 seconds at the very most. If it's getting too long, split it up. Don't give someone a whole paragraph, just a thought. Be careful. If you're working with notes or you're working with PowerPoint, speakers have the tendency to look at their notes, to look at the screen. That's not what you're there for. The PowerPoint is not your presentation. You are the presentation. You're the one to bring it to life. So don't stare, don't read from the screen. Glance at it to get your thoughts and turn your eye contact back to your listeners. Same thing with your notes. Don't stare at them. Glance at them for a second and then reconnect. And on a similar vein, don't look down right at the end of your thoughts. That's what a lot of speakers do. I'll try to demonstrate that here with my voice. Let's say I've got some notes in front of me, and every time I look down, my voice dips. So that's what happens at the end of a thought. People's eyes go down to the paper, even when they're making a really important point. They end up looking down, they're looking away. They break that eye contact right at the end. And usually they do it because, well, I want to look for my next point. I want to decide what to say next. But if you look down while you're finishing your thought, you're losing the impact of what you're saying. So ideally, you drive that point home, you finish it, you punctuate it with eye contact. Then you look at your notes, pause, decide what to say it, get it out there eye to eye. Let's keep going through these fundamentals. Again, whenever you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them along the way. Just go ahead and type them in. Next fundamental, gestures, which of course, as You can tell by the picture, what are you doing with your hands? Now, we don't necessarily recommend writing notes on your hand in the picture, but it's a funny picture. That's why I put it in. Here's a funny thing about gestures. Every one of us on this webinar right now gestures. We all do it. Every day, all the time, people gesture. And why do people gesture? Because that's what we do. We naturally talk with our hands. In front of a group, though, what happens is we get paranoid about our hands. We don't know what to do with them. So we put them on our sides, we put them behind us, we put them in our pockets. What you really need to do then is to make sure that you catch yourself gesturing when you're not presenting. Catch yourself. When you're on the phone, are you gesturing? When you're in a meeting, or when you're out this weekend with your kids, with your family, with friends, try to step outside yourself for a little while and see if you're gesturing when you're talking to them. Those are the same kind of gestures you can use when you're up in front of a group or in a meeting. Another great thing with gestures is you can steal them from other people. A great thing to try is watching videos of speakers. Go to TED.com. Great resource for videos for speakers to watch, TED.com. And watch some of the speakers and look for the gestures that they're using. Do you like those gestures? Do you like the way this person is gesturing? If so, steal some of them. Try it. Practice it in front of a mirror. Or better yet, in front of a video camera so you can really see how it works. That's what happens in our workshops is we videotape everything. And during our workshops, you get the great opportunity to try these things and then to watch the video so you can compare how does it feel, which usually feels a little bit weird or strange or different. You compare that to how does it actually look. And when you see that it looks good and it looks effective, it helps you realize that nobody cares how you feel. What we care about is how does it look? Gestures are good not just because it moves your hands around. Gestures are important because it increases your energy level. And it really does work. This week we were doing some coaching sessions with a whole group of people that are on the phones all the time. And they were asking us, well, why do we need to gesture? Nobody can see it. But here's what we saw during the videotaping. Every time they move their hands, their voice rises. It punctuates. It's this boom that happens. And when your voice goes up, your hands go up. When your hands go up, your voice goes up. Both are important. So it's not just using your hands because people like to see them move. It's because of everything else that gestures do for you. Now look, have you ever seen somebody gesture too much? Yes, of course you have. Or you've seen it where it's repetitious. It's the same thing over and over and over and over. After a while, that's distracting. So you do need to mix it up. And if you're lucky enough to get in front of a larger group, you got to go for even bigger gestures. If you're just keeping your hands at your side and kind of flicking your fingers a little bit, or keeping your hands clasped tightly in front of you and flicking your thumbs, in a large group, nobody's going to see that. The bigger the audience, the bigger the gestures have to be. Let's talk about some don'ts when it comes to your hand. And yes, there are definitely a lot of don'ts when it comes to using your hands. Let's talk about some of those don'ts. Be careful of clasping or rubbing or steepling your hands. Clasping, of course, is just grabbing them together, holding on for dear life. The hands are a giveaway to nervousness. So if you're clasped together, if you're rubbing your hands together the whole entire time, people notice that. And even if you're feeling confident, it gives the impression that you're nervous, that you're uncomfortable. The steeple, I'll demonstrate for you, and you can try it right there. Take one hand, open up all 5 fingers, spread them out. Take the other hand, do the same thing. Spread out those fingers. And now take the fingertips of one hand and touch them to the same fingertip on the opposite hand. That's the steeple gesture. We see people do this all the time while speaking, and they sometimes even bounce their fingers off of one another. But what's funny about the steeple is nobody does this over the weekends. We only do this at work because we think it looks professional. Does it, or does it make you look a little too trying to be professional? No, if you don't do that naturally, don't do it when you're up in front of people. Be careful of playing with a pen or your wedding ring or something like that that becomes a distraction in your hands. I mean, how many times have you been in a meeting and that's what you hear from across the table? Annoying, right? Well, definitely annoying if you're the speaker and you're the one doing it. So be careful. Put down the pen. Don't twist your ring around. Don't find that hangnail that suddenly shows up in the middle of your presentation. You got to watch out for that. And then be careful of what you're doing with your hands and your arms pointing. Think about it. Do you like when somebody waves a finger in your face and points a finger at you? Probably not. Instead of pointing, if you use an open hand to call on someone rather than pointing at them, it's just softer. It's more welcoming. It's easier for them to take. And of course, I'm sure you can guess, crossing your arms, hands on your hips, just conveys the feeling that you're upset, you're closed off, you don't want to be there. I'm going to pause for a second because someone did type in a question that I do want to address, and it was back on the topic of eye contact. So the question was that the person says they tend to kind of blank out when they have eye contact, which I could certainly understand. We've seen that happen before. That's one of the great reasons for not necessarily looking at the eyes, but looking in that space between the eyes, finding a blank spot on the face. The problem, and I know you might blank out when you make the eye contact, but think about it the other way. If you're not making eye contact with them, you're never connecting. You want each person in that audience to feel like, wow, he or she was speaking to me. And I wasn't just a part of the audience. I felt like I was getting some attention. You want everyone to get that. And you can't do that with just a quick half second, a quick blip on the person, and then move away. You got to sustain it. All right, let's keep going with these fundamentals. Next on the list is movement. And as you can all guess, there's good movement and there's bad movement. There's purposeful movement and there's ineffective movement. Now, look, none of you want to appear like this guy on the screen, looking nervous, uncomfortable, kind of shaky all over the place. There's a lot of people that move, but they don't do it right. The ideal movement has a purpose. The ideal movement has a reason for it. So what is purposeful movement? Well, maybe you're on one side of the room talking to the folks from there, and you decide, I've been in this one spot for a while. I want to go talk to the people over there. So you take some steps, you get there, you talk to them. Or maybe you decide you want to go back to your PowerPoint screen and point something out. You move over there, you stand next to it. That's a purpose. And maybe you come forward to make a really key critical point. That's a purposeful movement. So you got to use the space. Again, it depends on what you're given. Sometimes the space is set up in a way where there's no way for you to move. Or sometimes you're seated and you can't move. Or you're kind of backed into a corner. So this is in the ideal situation. So you got to move, you got to get there. But the key to making movement work is you have to stop. You don't want it to be constant movement. You want to stop. So when you get to that next place that you want to get to, plant your feet. Literally, boom, boom. Plant your feet, lock them in place. Feel like you're stuck right there on your spot. Planting your feet is important. We call it sticking the landing, just like in the Olympics. You got to stick the landing. The great thing about it is if you're one of these people that has all this nervous energy and you're moving and rocking all over the place, when you plant your feet, all that nervous energy has to go somewhere else. And if it can't get out through your feet rocking around and your legs moving, what you're going to find is it's channeled upward. And when you plant your feet, all that energy that was kind of leaking out through your legs is going to come out in gestures. and your voice and your face. Everything is going to change up top when you plant your feet and stand in place. And for any of you that have to speak formally and get behind a podium or a lectern, even more critical. Because if you're rocking around behind the lectern, it's magnified because you got this solid piece of furniture in front of you. If you want to bring in some purposeful movement, use your eye contact to make it happen. If you're on one side of the room, you want to get to the other side, look at somebody over there. Look at that person, move over that way. Get to that side of the room, stick the landing, plant your feet. What are some of the don'ts when it comes to movement? Well, don't just mosey across the stage. Moseying is this slow walk, kind of wandering across the space, eventually getting there, kind of just going with the pace of your voice. That's not purposeful. Purposeful is, I've been here, I want to get there, I'm going to get there. Take some quick steps. Boom, boom, boom. Don't slowly wander over there. Get there, stick the landing. You got to stick the landing because you want to be careful of the pacing or rocking. Pacing is where the person is just walking back and forth the whole time, walking this way, walking that way, constant movement and never stopping. Pacing becomes a distraction because people start to count your steps back and forth, and they focus more on that than what you're actually saying. Rocking, of course, is the person, maybe they've been told that they pace too much, so they don't pace, but they just rock from side to side. They rock forward and backward, and almost like they're on the deck of a ship. There's constant movement going on. That's not purposeful, that's nervous looking movement. Be careful also of backing away from your listeners. If you're saying something and backing away at the same time, it's almost saying to them, I'm uncomfortable, I'm nervous, I'm trying to get away from you. Now, if you need to walk back to get your screen, turn your back in silence, walk back over there, turn back, start speaking, rather than just walking forward and backing up. Here's a tip for how to work on your movement. If you're one of these people that likes to rock around a lot, we get a lot of those in our workshops. We have an exercise that we call paper training. We take a big piece of flip chart paper and we put it down on the floor, and we force you to stand on that piece of paper as you're speaking. And we do this for a while. And then what happens is, as you start to rock from side to side, you hear this crinkling underfoot, and it becomes distracting. So once you hear that crinkle, you stop, you straighten up, and you channel all that energy the right way rather than letting it leak out through nervous looking movement. So work on your movement. It really makes a difference. Let's keep going here. Fundamental number 4, your speaking pace. I'm guessing that some of you on this webinar are fast talkers. You don't have to fess up to it. You know who you are. Here's the good news. If you're a fast talker, there's nothing wrong with it unless you're way over the top fast like this auctioneer here on the screen. It's only a problem when it's an extreme, when it's way too fast or it's way too slow. The ideal with your speaking pace is you keep it natural. If you try to slow yourself down, then suddenly it doesn't sound like you anymore. It sounds unnatural. It sounds fake and forced. So the only ones that really need to worry about their speaking pace are the ones that are way too fast. And let's say that top 5 fast speakers, bottom 5 slow speakers. The rest of us, keep it natural. What you do want to do, though, to keep the interest level is mix up your pace. You don't just want to go the same pace the whole time. So sometimes you slow it down, sometimes you speed it up. Keep them guessing so you don't allow them to fall into a lull and just fall into not really listening anymore. We've got some of you saying, fessing up here that you're fast talkers. Thank you for volunteering that. I don't have to tell who you are. You know who you are. Another key when it comes to speaking pace, though, is if you're a fast talker, sometimes your words get all blurred together. And it's important to enunciate clearly. You have to hit every single syllable, every single consonant. To get it right, you have to feel almost like a high school English teacher who speaks perfectly. When you do it, it feels like it's overdone, and your listeners will never realize you're trying so hard. It just sounds nice and clear. Here are some don'ts when it comes to your speaking pace. Well, pretty self-explanatory. Don't go too fast. People can't keep up. If you go too slow, people get bored. Now, another question has come in that I'd like to address. Someone is asking about emotion, showing emotion to keep people engaged. I'm a big fan of using emotion in presentations, and we encourage our clients to do this. It's got to be in the right situation, of course. Not every situation calls for it. But people don't necessarily remember what you said during your presentation. A lot of people remember the feelings that you stirred up in them. So we're big fans. We encourage our clients to show emotion. It doesn't mean, break out in tears on stage, but it does mean you have to get motivating. You have to get deep and serious every once in a while. Sometimes you need to lay down the law and let them know. Sometimes you need to soften it up. A lot of it is done with your voice, which we'll get to. Now, let's keep going here. For you fast talkers, for you slow talkers, but especially for you fast talkers, there's a better solution than slowing down. And it's our next fundamental. The best solution for a fast speaking pace is to pause. And we all need to pause. Everybody needs to pause. Pauses are critical. Why are they critical? Well, double benefit. Pauses help the listeners, and they help you as the speaker. For your listeners, when you pause, they get a chance to think about what you just said. It gives them a little processing time. They think they heard you say something, you pause, they got it. It's in their head. It allows them time to take a note or two. And then while they're doing that, while they're thinking about what you said and they're taking down a note, the benefit to you is you get to think about what you're going to say next. And everybody wins. Double bonus. So if you ever find yourself, you kind of get lost all of a sudden mid-presentation, it's because you weren't pausing and your brain and your mouth get kind of out of sync. When you pause, those two things sync up. Not only that, but when you add pauses, it brings in a little bit of drama. It brings some impact to what you said. Let's say you're talking about cost savings and you've got an idea and you go into a meeting, you say, with all we're talking about here, we're going to save $200,000. And here's how we need to do. Here's what we got to take this step and this step and this step. Then we got to do this. But again, we're going to save that money. So it's going to do this. If you don't pause, there's no impact. When you say a number, a specific detail, you got to pause to let it sink in. Pausing tells your listeners that's important. Think about it. And during our workshops, what our clients always see is that pauses need to be there, and they can be a lot longer than you think. When you pause for 2 or 3 seconds, it feels like about 10 seconds. But remember, they don't care how it feels to you. So pause. Even if it seems too long, it's not going to be. What are the don'ts when it comes to pauses? Don't rush through. Take your time. Make them dramatic. Sometimes they'll be shorter, sometimes they'll be longer. Think about punctuation again. A comma, short pause. A period, longer pause. Period at the end of a section, even longer. The other don't fill up your pauses with noise. And if you're wondering what that means, it leads right into our next fundamental, non-words. Non-words are pauses filled up with noise, and here are some of our favorites right on the screen. Um, uh, you know, like. So is a maybe relatively new. You'll hear that all the time, and I'm sorry because it now that you're aware of it, you're going to notice it a lot more. So I apologize for that. Ask somebody a question, and half the time these days, they'll begin their answer with, "So let me tell you the answer. What do you do for a living?" "So I'm an accountant, and tell me about your company." "So what we do," it's annoying. The ums, the uhs, are they distracting? Yes. Why are they distracting? Because when there are too many, during a presentation, the speaker seems unprepared, or worse yet, they seem like they just don't know what they're talking about. And I'm sure I'm sure you've used them. We all do, but I'm sure you've all been in the situation where you count. Maybe you'll make a little check mark on your notes for every for every so, for every and you're comparing notes with your neighbors, seeing how many they got. Or again, the problem is it just creates this impression that you're unsure. Here's the good news. There are ways to get beyond non-words. The first solution is pausing. Back to the previous fundamental. All those non-words are pauses that we fill up with noise because we hate silence as speakers. Because when we're silent, our brains seem to think something's wrong. But all the listeners are doing is waiting for what's coming next. Solution number one, pause. Solution number two, be prepared. The more you know your stuff, the better you know your content, the fewer non-words are going to be there. In our workshops, we help people realize where their non-words are coming in, and we do it by snapping our fingers. So in conversation and during presentation, when they, we let them hear it by snapping. And right away, that gets you attuned to it, and that's where you start to pull them out. When it comes to non-words, what are the don'ts? Well, don't beat yourself up if you use one or two non-words during a meeting. If you're speaking for a half hour and you use two or three non-words even, nobody's going to notice. It's only noticeable when it really is a habit, when it's just over and over and over. But that's why you got to work on pulling them out. Pausing helps, preparation helps, and I would say teach your colleagues, teach your family, teach your kids the snapping game. That's what my kids call it. They think it's hilarious. Right away, it makes you aware. So don't get upset about one or two. And finally, don't use non-words. Get rid of them. Figure out ways to get by. Next fundamental, facial expression. I always love this picture of Jim Carrey. I'm not telling you that you have to go out and behave like Jim Carrey. He's kind of the poster child for facial expression, though. Over the top, for sure. But he's a great example because in our workshops, what we tell people is that to get facial expression right, you have to feel as if you're channeling Jim Carrey just a little bit. Now, you're never going to take it to that level, actually, but you have to feel as if that's what you're doing. You have to feel like, whoa, this is way too much to get it right. And I know a lot of people, they don't want to use expression because I want to be taken seriously. Will that get in the way? The point is, you don't always have to look and act serious for people to take you seriously. In fact, the more expressive you are, the more emotion you bring in with your face and with your voice, people will take you even more seriously. It's really important to smile if you're giving good news. If you're excited, if you say, I'm happy to be here, you don't want to say, I'm very happy to be here. I'm pumped up. I'm sure you can tell. Now, you got to smile. You got to bring that to life. Even on the phone, people can hear when you're smiling. It's critical. You got to do it. When you use that facial expression, it puts feeling behind the words. Nobody wants to be up there like a robot or like Ben Stein. Remember Ben Stein? Bueller, 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 that guy. Who wants to sit and listen to that guy? You got to be expressive. You really have to bring it to life. There are some don'ts, though, when it comes to facial expression. So let's talk about the don'ts. Seems self-explanatory. Don't smile when you're giving bad news. Make sure your facial expression matches the feeling you're trying to convey. And don't worry about how it feels. When you get facial expression right, you always feel like you're overdoing it. So the smile has to be huge. The eyebrows have to feel like they're way up above your head, like those cartoon eyebrows. Got to open your eyes huge, like Jim Carrey is doing, to convey the feeling. Finally, last fundamental before we get into speaking with confidence, energy level. It's tied into facial expression. It's tied into gestures that don't necessarily hop up on the lectern like the woman in the picture is doing, but we would all rather see a speaker that's got energy than somebody who's boring. Because boring is boring, and who wants to listen to that? Energy is great for a lot of reasons, but one of the best ones is it's the great mask. Energy covers up little flaws that might be happening. When you're energetic and you're bringing it to life, people aren't noticing the non-words quite as much. They're not noticing maybe if you're rocking around just a little too much or gesturing a little beyond what you might normally do, because we get caught up in the energy of what we're hearing. That's really where people's focus goes, and we don't see the little things quite as much. The best way to convey energy is with your voice. We're talking about vocal variety. Critical on the phone or in person. Vary your voice. Don't keep it in a monotone. So you want to go up, you want to go down. You want to get loud, you want to get soft. You want to play it up. You want to really bring some feeling to what you're saying, and you do it with your voice. Almost, for any of you on the webinar here that have kids, if you read a book to kids, you tend to put the voices in. You don't just read it flat and straight. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them saying I am. I do not. You don't read it like that. You put the voices in. It's really critical. It's, as somebody just typed in, it's inflection. It's bringing it to life with your voice. Now, somebody did just type in a comment here, and I want to tap into that as we go. They're asking, what's the best daily exercise to follow these skills and avoid confrontation? Avoiding confrontation, that's a whole other path. One great way to avoid confrontation is with your voice. If they get louder, you get softer. If they get louder, you get even softer. You maintain your composure. Practicing these skills, you got to do it every day, all the time. You got to do it when you're leaving a voicemail for people. If you have the opportunity, play the voicemail message back. Did you your way through it? Did you speed your way through it? Was it monotone? If so, go back, re-record it. In your meetings, in your one-on-ones, with your spouse, with your friends, with your kids, that's where you work on these skills in those easy situations, because that's how you build muscle memory. And then when you're in that tougher situation where there's a lot of people in the room, nerves are kicking in, your body will default to what it knows to do. And once you build up those muscles, they'll know exactly what to do. Now, when it comes to energy, understand that there is a difference between enthusiasm and conviction. And it depends on what your goal is. What feeling are you trying to convey? They both have energy. Enthusiasm goes for excitement and positive, and conviction is strong and tough. They both work. You just have to decide, what am I going for here? The don'ts when it comes to energy is, don't just get louder. This is not just about yelling at your listeners. Vary the volume. Get loud and get soft. In theater, they call it the stage whisper, where you're whispering, but everybody can hear you. You just can't stay down there the whole time. Then you got to get up and get it louder. And it's that difference, it's that variety that grabs people. Finally, don't hold back on your energy. If anybody says, what's the one thing I can do to help improve what I'm doing? We always say, it's got to be your energy. Turn up the energy. It can always be more than you think. If it's too much, people will let you know. But in our workshops, we see this all the time. We even get people up in front of the group and we videotape it where they get to the point they're feeling like they're selling on Home Shopping Network, or they feel like a used car salesman or a motivational speaker. And then they watch the video and they realize, wow, I thought I was at a 10 on the energy scale, and really it was only about a 6. Shows them they could even go further while staying within the bounds of what's appropriate. So those are the 8 fundamentals of public speaking. Now I've got 2 more tips to share before we wrap things up and answer some questions here at the end. Again, make sure you stick around toward the end, because all of you that are staying through are in the mix for the drawing for a free seat in one of our 2-day Sell It, Don't Tell It workshops, which I'll tell you about in a moment. First, let's talk about confidence, communicating with confidence. We're really talking about language here, not just body language anymore. So this person does not look very confident, looks kind of nervous, and nobody wants to come across that way. But what happens a lot with people that are uncomfortable and the confidence is not there is they use qualifiers. Qualifiers are words or phrases that make you sound kind of wishy-washy, kind of unsure. Here's a list. Qualifiers are words and phrases such as I think, we hope, it should, this might, I believe, we feel. Think about how that sounds. Going into a sales call, saying, if you work with our company, here's what you would get. If you work with us, here's what you would get. Or delivering a presentation, we hope you're going to get something out of this, and you may walk away with some new skills that you might be able to use. In our workshops, we call people out on this and we repeat it back. We say, you think, you hope, if we work with you. Now, we're not saying it's wrong. What we're saying is you got to think about your words. Can it be stronger? If so, either get rid of the qualifier. Instead of saying, we think this is going to be a great workshop, just say, this is going to be a great workshop. You're going to get a lot out of this. Or you change your language to be stronger. Instead of saying, if you work with us, here's what you would get. When you work with our company, here's what you're going to get. It does make a difference. It feels kind of cocky. It feels a little too aggressive. It's not. It's never as aggressive as it feels to you. Somebody typed in a question asking about a website that I mentioned a while back, TED. It's TED.com, TED.com. TED is an organization. Maybe you've heard about these TEDx events that they have where they bring in speakers on all sorts of topics, full range of topics. TED is an acronym. I can't remember off the top of my head what it stands for, but check it out. It's a great way to see all sorts of speakers. You can get all sorts of great information there. Last point on communicating with confidence, 3 words we encourage our clients to get out of their vernacular as much as they can when presenting. And the 3 words are I, me, and my. The personal pronouns. As much as possible, you want to get rid of those. Now, why? And why does that take away from confidence? Imagine the speaker that gets up there and is only talking about themselves. I'm glad to be here. Let me tell you why I'm here today. I'm here because I'm an expert. I've got a lot of great information I want to share. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you about me. I'm going to tell you about my background. I'm going to tell you why I think this is so important. And meanwhile, you're sitting in the audience thinking, boy, this person really thinks a lot of themselves. What about us? We're the decision makers. We're the one in the mix here. Thank you. Answer came in. I knew it would be out there. Technology, entertainment, and design. There's our TED acronym. Thanks, Mitch. So these personal pronouns, what you can actually do is use the words you or we or your company name rather than I, me, or my. Or instead of saying, let's talk about why I'm here. Here's what I'm going to talk about. Say, let's talk about why you're here today. Here's what you're going to learn about. By the end of this presentation, you're going to have a better idea. You're going to have new skills. You're going to have learned a lot of great information. It's all about you. It's not about me. Until it has to be. Until I need to take ownership and say, if there's a problem, you call me, I'll take care of it from there. As much as you can, get rid of those personal pronouns. So there you have it, folks. We have covered the top 10 tips, 8 fundamentals of public speaking, 2 additional tips related to communicating with confidence. Now, before we wrap up and take any final questions, I do want to let you know about this workshop that I mentioned early on. Our 2-day open to the public workshop we call Sell It, Don't Tell It, taking business presentations to the next level. This is our opportunity for individuals to be exposed to our training. Most of what we do is in corporate workshops. So we go into companies and we create workshops and seminars and do one-on-one coaching with individuals and groups of people, all within a company that either have the same job or that work in related roles. But we also have options here for individuals. And every month in our offices, we have this 2-day workshop, the video intensive. These workshops are limited to 8 participants maximum. So it's not you hiding in the back of a lecture hall. You're deep involved. You're going through all these videotape exercises like everyone is. We do these at our offices right here in Northbrook, Illinois. The cost per person is $1,600, but one of you is going to get that for free. And all of you, if you're interested, get a discount. We offer a 25% discount to anybody that signs up for our workshop because they heard about it through this webinar. And even if you work with somebody that was not here, but they're interested and they sign up and they say, I heard about it through the webinar, we don't check, you get the discount. We've got the dates coming up, May 12th and 13th. Well, that's Monday, Tuesday. Chances are you ain't going to make it for that one. But we do these every month. You can visit our website at presentationtrainers.com. It'll give you all the information. Go to the section where it talks about your options and find the information for our public workshops. You'll find it all right there. I do encourage you to visit our website again if you haven't lately. We have a whole section that we call free stuff. And in the free stuff section, you will find our ebook, which you can download for free. You will find the last 12 issues of Speaker's Digest, which is our monthly free electronic newsletter that we put out every month. By signing up for this webinar, you'll be on the list for that. So if you haven't yet, you'll be receiving those in your mailbox once a month, usually towards the end of the month. So there you go. You have learned quite a bit in 1 hour. Glad you were able to attend the session here today. As I said early on, it's our mission here at EMS to rid the world of boring presentations, one speaker at a time. These skills that you learned about here today, all of those fundamentals, communicating with confidence, correlating all of that with your ideal personal style, these are critical, but they take work. These muscles need exercise. If you don't exercise them, they atrophy really quickly and go back to their old ways. You really have to work on this every day, all the time. There are ways to do it, and EMS is here as a resource for you anytime. You can visit our website, presentationtrainers.com. You can send me an email. There's my email address right there in front of you, or give us a call. I'd be happy to talk to you about the possibilities, what we can do for your organization, and how we come in with companies like yours to work with individuals and teams. Happy to speak about it with you anytime. So, for those of you that are able to stick around, I'll be happy to stick around and answer questions. If you're ready to start your weekend on this Friday afternoon and need to cut out, I certainly understand. But I'm ready for questions whenever you are. So go ahead, type them in. If you're going to be cutting out, thanks for being here and thanks for joining us. All right, let's see the questions coming in. First one comes in about seated. Is this different when you're seated versus when you're standing? And yes, but not very different. Seated presentations, it's still presenting. You're just on eye level rather than up above people. But the same rules do apply. You make eye contact across the table. You gesture above the table, not below the table, so people can see your hands. One thing interesting is related to movement when seated. And the danger is these comfy swivel chairs that when you're rocking side to side, back and forth, that's a distraction too. Please be aware of that. All right, what other questions have you got? Type them in if you've got some for me. And for those of you still here, if you do have questions beyond this, please feel free to reach out by email. I'm happy to be a resource, as I said. EMS is here for you. Whatever we can do to help you and to help you rid the world of boring presentations, just like we're trying to do, we're happy to help. Well, no more questions coming in, and means I've done a decent job here, I guess, and it means that you've gotten a lot of information, and I know you have. Glad to have had you here today. Again, if you have any further questions, happy to talk. There's a couple more coming in, so if you want to stick around, I'm going to answer those right now. First one is, does your clothing play an important role? Of course it does. Everybody needs to be dressed appropriately, especially when you're the center of attention. A great tip that I always heard is you want to figure out what the normal dress attire is for your audience, and then take one step up from there. So if your audience is business casual, maybe you go business casual, but with a jacket. Maybe you go, something just a little bit nicer than everybody might be wearing in the room. Gives you a leg up. You don't want to have torn jeans. You don't want to have torn pants. You don't want to have something that's ill-fitting that people are just going to notice. It does make a difference. Another question came in, and this is related to English as a second language. Question is, I'm a foreign language speaker and I've found it difficult to keep people engaged because of my accent, and how do I enunciate? What I can tell you is there are people out there that help people correct accents. But sometimes it's not something that needs to be corrected. It's just something that you need to be aware of. A couple of tips on that. First tip, pausing is critical when you have an accent. Critical because you have to pause even more than you might do otherwise. In this group, people need to hear it. They need to process it. They need to think, wait, I thought I heard the person say this. Oh, yeah, that's what it must have been. And when there are words that sound different than the norm, they need that time to think about what they heard. But here's an exercise that I've done with some of our clients who do have accents. And it feels weird, but it really does work. One thing I encourage them to do, and we get this on video, is I encourage them to pretend that they're an American. You know how just like here in the States, we sometimes imitate somebody with a British accent or a Mexican accent. Well, you can do the same thing, and it's amazing how well it works. When suddenly this person with the accent is speaking like an American sounds to them. And it feels really fake when you do it. but it suddenly sounds clearer. So try to fake that American accent. Put in those long pauses. Enunciate even clearer. It does take practice, for sure. Sometimes even repeating a phrase or repeating a word is critical. All right, another question came in about questions. What do you do when people ask you questions that you don't know the answers for during a PowerPoint presentation? Or really during any meeting, what happens when you don't know the answer? Well, really, we're human. We are human, and sometimes we don't know the answer. We don't know everything. People won't necessarily give you a hard time because you don't know the answer, unless, of course, it's something that you really should know and you don't. But even still, to admit, you know what, I don't have the answer to that. Let me do a little bit of research and I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you by the end of the day with a response. You can build your credibility by getting back to them in that time frame. And you get much more credibility by admitting you don't know the answer than by faking it, by answering a different question. Or just, a lot of people, they'll say, well, and they start to talk and they start to talk and they start to talk, but they finally circle back to, but you know what? I don't know the answer, so let me get back to you. Well, why didn't you start that way? Why did you have to do all that talking? It doesn't feel good to not have the answers, but you certainly are better off admitting it than faking it. Now, along similar lines, in a PowerPoint presentation, maybe they ask you a question that you're going to be addressing later on. And then you've got two choices. Your choices are either you jump ahead and you answer the question right now, even though you were going to get to that, or you tell the person, thank you for that question. Let me write it down. We're going to be addressing that in about 5 minutes, a few slides ahead. When that time comes, I'll be sure to answer your question. And that way you don't have to answer it right then. You answer it when you're ready to, rather than letting them take you out of order. Well, I know we are past our 4 o'clock time here, 4 o'clock here in the central region. Again, I appreciate your time for being here. EMS is a resource for you anytime. We would love to talk to you individually about what we can do to help your companies, to help your teams, to help develop greater leaders in your organization by helping them work on their presentation, communication, and leadership style. I hope you all have a great, great weekend. Thanks for being here on the webinar, and have a great weekend. Successful speaking out there. Any questions, send me an email. I'll answer them as soon as I can. Take care, everybody.